to look at the author of the test and ask them to fix it?
Well, right now there are issues which are release blockers opened up against the owners of the pages.
But yeah, I think they may not. If they didn't write the test, they may not know how to fix the test. It may actually be over at the test case.
I guess we can. I think all of them had somebody at least tagged in the issues. I know I've created them all, but I don't know if they all have. I don't know if they all have owners, and they probably aren't. And you're probably right. They probably haven't been tagged with the person who wrote the test.
And if they are tagged, you know how it goes. Like how many people can keep up with the flood of information. So, Shweta, like, how do you want to handle this? I mean, if one thing I've seen in the past is that it's really good for any GitHub issue to make sure that there's one owner, so there's no sort of confusion about who owns it, and then actually reach out to the owner and get them to act that they own it and fix it.
The problem which Eric is mentioning is we don't even have an owner.
Yeah, so I'm saying that we need to do a little bit of owner, make sure we have the right owners for these issues.
Okay, we can review that in the working group leads.
Sounds great. All right.
So how do you want to handle next week if we don't get enough owners for 75 tests, and next week is the last week, by TOC the week should be done, what should we do for the P0s which are not claimed?
I think historically, have we actually had 75 tests?
We did not, but this time I think there were a couple of missing tests, and Jacob did a good job by adding those in the template. So they may have increased the number of P0s.
Yeah, and I would say that as long as we're in this land of manual testing, increasing the number of P0s is just going to make it kind of non-deterministic behavior, which P0s actually get tested. It'd be better if we could just focus on the P0s that are really truly P0s.
Okay.
Other people in the TOC, I'm doing the complaining talking here. What are your thoughts?
The same thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
hard reality. Yeah.
I mean, you're reading from a well-used and often cited concern. Is it just me, or did the number of P0s go up?
Yes, they went up. I think that's what we're hearing. So I'm saying that let's try to go the other direction. And can somebody stop the recording so I don't have to go on the record as saying we're going to reduce quality? Oh, it's too
late. What is the reason the number of P0s went up? Is it because we added critical features?
Yeah, I mean, so part of the way of reducing that set is we just make a call. The working group leads make a call on whether they think anything going in the release is likely to upset the functionality that is detailed in the page. And if it's not, we just say, okay, we don't really need to test it. It's probably going to be okay. It's a P1 in that case. And of course, you know what happens with P1s.
So Josh, one thing which we have discussed in the past is the concepts page. Most of the time that don't change, but we still keep that as P0. Would that be a risk for anyone if we move that out from P0 to P1 for this release?
I would ask the working group leads if anyone thinks it's a risk, and if no one says it's a risk, I'd bump it down to P1.
Okay.
Yeah, given 1.9 is a stability release, so probably the risks are very minimal. Louis, sorry.
No, I think that's roughly what I was going to say. Only more eloquently.
Okay.
We're reading each other's mind.
You guys have worked together for a while. Okay, not claim 75. All right, so I think anything else on this one, or should I move on to the next one?
Please move on to the next one.
Okay, let's do the, hey, this looks like a familiar link. Pick 3 test cases to automate.
So 2 of the working group did that. Rest are
Got it.
and we have 15 test cases which need help?
I think this is a great approach. Instead of boiling the ocean, let's just try to make a little bit of progress every release. So working group leads, please try to get 3 done. And good point, John. Why do we have, why are we including P0s that are automated here? Are we including P0s that are automated in this list?
Yeah, if you look at that list, it's not 88.
Because some have already been automated?
Yeah.
How do I tell? How do I filter those out?
You already filtered them out, but that list is not 88 rows.
It is 54. You're right.
Yeah.
So John, the one which are automated, how can we get the updates on whether or not they're working? Because they're not getting updated in the sheet.
I'm not sure what you mean. Isn't the whole point of automation that we don't have to worry about manually testing it anymore?
Right.
If we still have to manually test it, then why do we waste all this time automating?
No, John.
To answer your question, Shweta, I think the automated ones that are failing today have GitHub issues in the GitHub column.
Yeah.
So there should be, I believe, 6 of the automated ones that have a GitHub issue associated with it. That's what I've been doing to try to identify the automated ones that are failing today.
Okay, so those should be fixed. All right.
Okay, so that goes the number, I guess, 60 instead of 88.
Yeah, more palatable, but still too high.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our convergence rate, if we're doing what would we say, 3 per working group, right?
Yeah.
Feels like a 30-year mortgage payment or something like that.
5, 6. It's at least 15-year mortgage payment. No. So we would get 18 a release, right?
Not all of the test cases can be automated. So what we have done is,
Sure, but we would still make good progress on what, 60, right?
Yeah.
And what is our growth rate?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Do we know how many we had in 1.8?
I have to calculate that. I do not have those figures.
Yeah, it sounds like it wouldn't be too hard to calculate, but no one knows that off the top of their head. Okay. What did I do? Okay, sorry. AIs from last meeting. What to do with untested platforms like AliCloud? Yes. Josh needs to do this.
This was the docs question.
So Josh, it's a AI from the last one added here. I know you took volunteer job of reaching out to them, but my question is, what are we planning to do in term? And the banner which we have added, what should we do with that?
Right, so there were some suggested verbiage changes for the banner, right, to make it less terrifying.
Sorry, what is the banner? Is that here?
It's one of the platform. I think maybe Alibaba or something. If you go there, you'll see it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a terrifying banner.
Yeah. So I had actually changed this in master based on feedback from Neeraj. I'm just waiting on the cherry pick to be approved for 1.8. So
Jacob, if you wrote this banner, this looks like something I would write. Just to get somebody's attention. Yeah.
Yeah. If you go to preliminary.istio.io, you'd see the new one.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, let's want to look at what the new one.
Is there a dot between preliminary and Istio, or just?
Yes,
yeah,
there is.
primary dot.
There we go. Okay. Hey, it's yes, equally accurate, less terrifying. Good. Actually, quick sanity check. Anyone have any concerns with this new banner?
The only question is whether we want to still indicate that it was vendor-provided content.
Yeah, that would help understand. That would help if anyone looks at us and say, "Why isn't it been tested?" That would answer that question.
The one question I have about this, and I know, yes, it's not as scary, but a lot of these haven't been tested since like 1.3. If you say hasn't been tested since 1.9, would people assume it was tested in 1.8 or 1.7?
Well, this phraseology doesn't say since, right? It just says has not been tested on whatever the latest release is.
You could add a may, and may have not been tested for prior releases too.
Yeah, that's probably overkill.
Okay.
And also there's a last updated, which is 2 years ago for this page. So people can tell.
All right, I'm going to capture some notes here. All right, so we are saying, what do we want to substitute? How do we want, oh, come on. What do we want to change this to?
So there was a question, right? If we wanted to blame the vendor, right, effectively.
So this vendor maintained document.
In some cases, some of these environments were written by people who didn't work at the vendor. Do I have that right?
Vendor specific?
I would think it's most people from the vendor.
In the case of the Alibaba one, yeah, but there were, Jacob, do you remember what the list of them were?
I mean, I could get the authors, but I don't know like where they were from. I couldn't find an association with those authors, you know.
Okay. Let's just assume they're from the vendor, and they can always yell about it later.
Do you want vendor maintained then?
Vendor provided or vendor maintained, yeah.
Which one?
Well, if it's 2 years out of date, it's not maintained, just provided.
Right. Okay.
And then, that provides an incentive for the vendor to come back in and clear the flag. Right?
Yeah. Sounds great. I like that.
And or provide automation if they know how to do that. Okay.
I think we are moving on. So sorry, context here. Istio 2021 roadmap theme guidance. Niraj will take the lead on this. Niraj, are you here? I haven't heard you speak up. So you'll all pile on.
We're missing Niraj and Dan.
Busy. What was that, Mitch?
So we're missing Niraj and Dan.
Okay. Well, I think Niraj is busy leading the effort in the 2021 roadmap.
Neeraj had a family emergency. I had a discussion with him earlier this morning, so he will return today.
Okay. All right. Anything we should consider here right now? We had a review on this recently, didn't we, Shweta?
The working group.
Maybe not.
I thought it was presented in the work group leads meeting. Not in the TOC.
Yeah. The working group leads are working on updating the sheet, and there are presentation dates on which they will be presenting soon.
And then I think other than this plan, we're also asking for the kind of a roadmap for each feature for the promotion.
At graduation. Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Looks great.
On the first tab, the TOC members are working on the themes, and Neeraj is taking the lead just for everyone's.
Okay. Anything, Shweta, that you want us to do other than just take a look and say it looks good?
Not yet. Let the working group present. Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. Doc working group updates. Who edited this one? Who wants to talk?
Oh, yeah, so I'll get started. So you guys all know Frank has been working on the documentation work group lead for probably a little bit over 2 years. And in January, he submitted a PR that he wants to step down from the documentation work group lead. So that PR is already been merged. So now we have been discussing this scenario on the steering committee, and what we kind of decided, because of lacking of one person willing to step in for Frank's job as documentation workgroup lead, we're going to try to establish a editorial review team. So far, I believe we have 6 members from steering staffed for that review team. And we certainly would love to have some of you willing to help be part of the review team as well. So I guess this is a call for action. If you guys are interested, please let us know here or offline. You know, we'd love to have you guys part of the review team.
Do people, so, okay, that contact thing, how do they reach out to the steering committee? I guess I just...
No, so...
oh, yeah, how do you want them to...
They can just reach out to us, yeah.
So we'll have a group who are content reviewers who can provide editorial review, right? That does not mean that they're necessarily going to be able to provide a technical review, right? So, right, that onus still resides on the working groups and the working group leads to make sure that the content is technically accurate, right, and consistent.
So what is
this group is to make sure that the docs follow, you know, content standards, right, and are consistent in other ways, right? The things that Frank was doing before, right?
Yeah, I guess I would add. I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish.
Or the things that, you know, Riggs and Adam were doing before, right? Where they're not the subject material expert, but they are editorial experts, right? They can provide guidance about how to write good docs. We don't have professional doc writers on the project anymore, so we have to backfill for that function in some way. And this is the best that we can come up with, which is we have a pool of reviewers who are going to do their best to play doc writers, right, in their spare time.
What happens to the doc working group?
Great question. So there's still a question about whether there's a remaining function, right, which is someone who is responsible for docs in all the ways except content, right? The infrastructural aspects of docs, any tooling, linting, and maybe a managerial function to make sure that content is being produced and maintained. Not that they're responsible for the content, but that, you know, they're doing all the infrastructural things around the content and possibly participating maybe somewhat in cat herding. And Shweta, I was going to talk to you a little bit about help with this process, because now we have a more diffuse process that will need a good organizational muscle. Something that I don't claim to be good at, but I am happy to be a content reviewer. I've volunteered to do that. So there's a question, right? To define the charter for the docs working group and leads so that they could run it, and what is that charter? And this is the phase of the meeting where it is entirely open to public comment and suggestion, right, about what they think, what people think might be an effective docs working group charter, and who might be interested in such a charter. But first, maybe we should talk about the pool.
Yep.
Before we talk about the charter.
Yeah. So one thing I would want to add to this is now we have technical reviewer and editorial reviewer, so there may be a little bit more approval process involved, especially at the initial stage. It used to be Frank is kind of doing both technical and editorial as well. So once you have his blast on the approval of the PR was just merged. Now you would have somebody from the maintainer or workgroup lead from a given workgroup first, and then somebody from the editorial review team. And because of the editorial review team is also new, so initially they feel more comfortable to have actually 2 people review first from the editorial review team.
So I still have a very basic question. How does somebody join the editorial review team?
So I volunteer to set up the GitHub for the editorial review team, so they can just contact me offline unless we want to set up an approval process for that, which I don't think we want to at the moment.
And I guess my question is how is this going to change the current behavior? Because right now I think it's Frank, myself, and I think Nate are probably the people who are approving the PRs that are going in right now.
Right. So
I mean, if we're going to change that process, right, do the three of us become members of this review committee?
Yeah, so that's what I was mentioning. So if you guys are willing to continue to be editorial review, which Frank clearly said he doesn't want to be, you are willing to sign, you are open to sign up with me, you know, to be part of the review team. Else who else is on the review team would do the editorial review. And then we still want the technical side, whether a maintainer or a workgroup lead from the workgroup to do the technical review as well.
Okay, I mean that makes sense. Have somebody from the real work group review it as well as some editor sort of person.
Exactly.
Yeah, normally the technical review should happen first, and the content review would happen. The editorial review would happen second. I think that would be normal, right? We don't have to run in that order, but it's probably better if we did. We probably also need, right, and this may be within that pool, or maybe some other function, which is a super reviewer, right, which is someone who's just capable of performing, who is entrusted to make good decisions in an expeditious fashion if we need a review to go through quickly. But that would be an exceptional thing and not a normal course of business thing.
Do we have anyone identified for that role yet?
No, I mean we have, I guess, you know, Eric and Nate who have been doing this, but that's not like I don't want them to like. It should be an exception, right? Like we need this to unlock the release, and so this PR has to go out today, kind of a thing. And for whatever reason, we already have that function, though, right? I mean, the TOC leads can perform that function.
Oh yeah, the force merge.
Right, we can do that. So I guess we don't need that. I guess we can just say that the TOC can do that in exceptional cases. But if people want to volunteer for it, that's fine. Sorry, what was that, John?
Sorry, just side conversation about how we're going to actually do that enforcement, because I don't think GitHub can say you need docs, working group, and networking.
Yeah,
I don't think it. Yeah, it is. You're right. It is convention.
Yeah, but we still want to make sure the people who are in the pool is set up in Git to do the final approval.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what Frank would often do. He would reach out to me and say, take a look at this PR, and then he would approve it only after that happened. So
yeah, except for smaller one, you know, he would just approve it.
Can I ask a related question? Do we have any guidance on where to put non-critical docs? I mean, wiki. We discussed a lot of things. I mean, things that are not meant for most users, but we still want documented, and maybe with a lower bar.
That has been wiki, right? The only challenge has been with wiki is a version awareness. We have people have landed on wiki pages which were specific. So now several people have started like putting version specific information in the wiki. As long as we do that, I think that's an easier and a quicker thing.
Works for me. Just want to make sure that we are on the same page.
Well, I mean, the TOC, I don't know what the TOC thinks. Maybe you and I are on the same page. Yeah.
Yeah, I think wiki is great. I would appreciate some discoverability of the wiki. Maybe when somebody create a useful wiki, they can socialize at least in the workgroup meeting so people knows. Because I do know like John wrote a really good wiki page, and I didn't know it until Cal Stoney wrote a blog about it, and I happened to read his blog to learn that he wrote a wiki on how do you troubleshooting Istio. So these are the things, you know, I'd rather know it in the first place.
I know you like this. How about Twitter?
Twitter could work too. Depends on how much you want to be discovered by the user.
If we wait long enough, Carl will tweet about them for better or for worse.
Okay, from now on, all the docs will be tweets.
Louis, you're muted.
Should we move on or anything?
Sorry, I was just going to say
there's
always eng.istio.io if we wanted to have a separate docs pipeline that published to that for things that were just truly internal. We could do that. For the moment, I think Mandar's suggestion in the wiki is more than adequate.
Go ahead. I just want to capture. Can I checkpoint Mandar's suggestion? Mandar, what do I say here?
That wiki is okay, but make sure that the version is mentioned.
Thank you.
Because wiki itself is unversioned.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Eric, what were you going to say? Sorry, I interrupted you.
No problem. I was just going to say there's still, and I think Louis mentioned this earlier, right? There's still some, if you will, documentation specific things like the scripts that we run at release time to generate the new release and populate, you know, istio.io from what was in preliminary.istio.io, et cetera. So I don't know how that is necessarily handled if there isn't a work group per se.
I think there needs to be a work group and a work group lead.
Yeah.
For that function.
Okay.
Yeah, so the notes that Josh captured early, doc workgroup shifts to more of an infrastructure focus, right?
Okay.
Okay, and did somebody else try to speak? Who did we clobber?
I'm trying a quick follow-up story. So one concern I have is a lot of the docs are alpha or kind of experimental in the official docs. Is there any way we could move that stuff to the wiki or whatever we decide?
That's interesting. What do you guys think about that? Like, if you're experimental, be on a wiki. Don't even take any.
If it's not beta, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's
that's actually our documented standard, so I'm in favor of it.
For experimental, for alpha. So I think experimental feels like a no-brainer. Alpha, I could see us having a discussion on.
Yeah.
On the community page, it states that we do not provide user-facing documentation for experimental features.
Yeah. So okay. So experimental. Let's say wiki first. What do we do about alpha?
I'd argue two different ways here. First of all, we want users to start using alpha, but the other thing is there's no requirements for documentation tests or anything like that with alpha, so there's no guarantees that it actually works. But
actually, your alpha checklist has documentation in there because I went through one last release.
I thought that we didn't require that until beta.
Let me double check.
Wikidocs is also doc. I mean, they can use it using the wiki, but at least it will be a clear distinction between what is stable, reliable, and you know, we can focus basically on the stable stuff. And I don't know.
Do we have concern? So I think it's the current state is that people can add a documentation to istio.io for alpha features. Do we actually want to say no? We would really prefer that to go in the wiki.
That's super hard, right? I mean,
yeah.
Like with alpha APIs,
right,
which are very clearly intended to get user feedback.
Right.
If we put them in the same place as we put documentation for experimental features, it will be more difficult for users to discern the difference between the two. Experimental features we don't want users adopting, and alpha we do want them adopting.
That's a good way of looking at it.
But I would rather have user confused between experimental and alpha than between production and alpha.
Yeah, but then we won't get adoption. So yeah, that's the trade-off, you know. adoption versus greater adoption, but greater risk that people can take a alpha feature out to production without awareness of the risks.
Yeah, I would rather that we, in the docs where something is alpha, give people or make discoverable more precisely what alpha means in that context. Okay. And look at the documentation user experience around that rather than hiding things that drastically.
Yeah.
We do currently use an alpha banner that sort of explains that it's there for feedback. I can give an example in the chat here.
Yeah, no, I've seen it. Yeah, I mean, that's clearly appropriate.
Yeah.
If there's a question about that not showing up everywhere it should, right? That's something else we could talk about. But if users choose not to read that, well, what do you want to do?
Move on to the next one.
Yeah. Did we?
Well, I guess the question is, if there is this more defined role for the docs working group lead, we need candidates. So if people would like to self-nominate or nominate, maybe just put yourself in a comment.
Is there a possibility of advertising the role as well if nobody from here is interested?
Yeah, I just view this as one avenue of advertising.
What about discuss.io or Twitter? If anybody...
Probably not Twitter. Discuss, yes, the work group leads probably can also bring this up in their meetings. Usually this has been the most fertile ground for asking for nominations, but obviously not everybody shows up all the time, me included. So let's just start that process, and if people are interested.
Okay. Then one more thing, can Frank help with one pager of what he may be doing outside the charter of docs so that we are not missing anything? And it's a discovery later, so that way at least he can write what he was doing as a working group, docs working group lead. That may be helpful to jot down where we need help.
Yeah, no, I think we should start a process of refining the charter, right? And Frank can be a part of that.
Okay.
Yeah, we never had a doc work group charter, so who is going to own that charter? Who is willing to drop the charter?
Would Frank be willing to do it as part of his handoff? If he would willing.
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, then that's on the TOC if it's not on Frank.
Yeah, I think that if somebody, so one way of handling it is whoever volunteers for it can create a charter. All right. Otherwise, they might be bound to a charter. It could go either way.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the TOC has to review it and approve it.
Yeah.
But
if a TOC creates a charter, somebody else might look at the charter and say, yes, I want to sign up for this. It's more concrete.
Right.
Yeah. Does anybody in the TOC want to write a charter for the doc working groups?
I don't feel qualified to write it, but I'm happy to write it. Eric, are you willing to help me write it, even if I'm not implying that you're volunteering for this job?
That's fine. I can do that too.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. There it is. Okay. Status. Okay, going once, going twice. Anything else on this one? And I'd love to close it out.
I don't remember what's the decision for experimental.
Experimental features in terms of where the documentation should land.
Yeah, I mean, are we going to move all the experimental to the wiki, or is that going to be defined in the docs charter?
I think we said that new experimental content should go to the wiki. I don't think we addressed what we should do with existing experimental content. And I would just say, I would be fine just saying, you know, let it stay there and either graduate it to alpha or evict it over time.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, fine. Status API graduation. So I think that Mandar and Mitch, do you want to? I think that you're saying you're going to reduce the scope of the API to get a subset of the API approved more quickly. Is that right? How would you want to introduce this?
This was by the UTL. Yep. I think maybe they should introduce it.
So that would be Sven or Louis. We had a random discussion on this, but you know, that wasn't from the TOC. But Mitch, I guess I don't understand the intention of bringing this up to the TOC now. So if you could,
I did not put this on the agenda. This is not my item.
Okay. Mandar.
It was already on the agenda as discuss API or something like that, and I just converted that to kind of more specific. We can choose to skip it right now if that's more appropriate, and we could move on to the next one.
Okay, then it's just, if you want to discuss it now, if there's anything, you know, you'd like us to review, just let me know. Otherwise, we can, you know, discuss it in some future week.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. Next one, Doug Reed, rename policies and telemetry working group to extensions and telemetry working group. Makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think, Doug?
Well, I'm in favor of it because I wrote the doc. So we've done this in everything except for name officially. I mean, our Slack channels, the way we refer to each other, but it's still causing confusion when we look at goals and ownership of tests and things. So it's just asking for TOC approval to officially rename policies and telemetry to extensions and telemetry.
Should it just be extensions? And then, you know, policy and telemetry can both be extensions?
No, I think we should call out telemetry specifically because it's
people understand
I think so too.
Okay.
Should it be should it be telemetry and extensions?
That's the question. How would you say?
Let's see. I think it should be whatever words we are already using in some of the other docs, so that we don't have to change those again.
And Costin, we agree. That's why we're trying to get rid of policy from the name here.
Yes. Policy keeps coming back to bite us.
I approve.
I approve.
Yeah.
If you want to call yourself telemetry and extensions, you're also welcome to do that.
Okay.
All right. Approve both.
Thank you. That's all.
Do we have quorum to approve? I think we do.
We have 4 people.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. John, VM graduation.
Yep. We were looking to potentially mark this as beta for 1.9. I will full disclosure, we do not have every single checkbox on here marked off. The reason is that we don't currently have the infrastructure to do like the long running qualification test for VMs yet. We're working on it, but we don't have that yet. Same with the automated documentation testing. I will note that multi-cluster also just went to beta and they don't have the release qualification testing either.
They don't?
That would be our 2 big gaps there. It's just the automated testing. So we, of course, manually tested the load and the documentation, but we don't have the automation yet.
So John, what about the documentation stuff that was identified yesterday in the review? Was that considered non-blocking?
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, we did the supportability review and there was more documentation requested. So we're going to work on that. And I guess what I was looking for was like conditional approval then, like once we have those docs that we're good to go. I put this on here before we did the reviews because the reviews yesterday, so I kind of forgot about that. But yeah, we were missing documentation on like operations, like how to debug it. We have all the information is there. We just don't have the documentation on how to actually do it, and like architectural diagrams to understand what's actually going on. That was the result of the supportability review. So our plan is by 1.9, we would certainly have those docs. By 1.9, we will almost certainly not have the automated testing in place, though.
So. What would it take to get the automated testing? What is necessary for that?
Yeah, I think there's two parts. One is the documentation testing. I think we can probably do like, it's hard to get a real VM in a test in our pre-submit, and possibly not something we want to do because it's slow and expensive. But we could do like run it in a Docker container, and it would probably work for the docs test. Actually, I know it would work because that's how I do all my development. But we just haven't done that. For the automated testing, or like the load test, we just need to come up with some way that we can automatically provision VMs, set them up, connect them to the cluster. It's more just about automating that stuff, and that would be with real VMs. So
like real VMs as opposed to something like KubeVirt.
Like in our integration tests in the main Istio, we actually don't run VMs. We just run them as pods with every single feature disabled. So like we turn off DNS, we don't match them with the service, etc.
Okay.
And so we have like fake VMs essentially.
But we're still getting some of the effects of Kubernetes networking because we're in the pod, right?
We do get some. I think it's proven to be pretty close approximation though, and it's captured a lot of issues with real VMs. Okay. So yeah.
So John, I think I'm trying to summarize the exceptions you're asking for. So one is some doc issues have been identified. You would fix those before marking it beta. The other one is stability tests don't currently exercise VMs. I know that people on our team are actually working on that now, but those tests would happen sometime in Q1. They wouldn't block the release, so they'll fast follow. The open source Istio release, I mean. And then we're
Josh, it's not clear if those tests would actually be able to be put into open source, or do we think that those would be able to be put into the...
Good question. My understanding is that we put them in the open source.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm sure they will only run on GCP, probably, because it's kind of hard to make a generic cloud provision VM setup, but that's kind of already what we do. So
I think earlier you made a statement that we would manually do the stability testing. I think that without the automation, that manual test would be laborious to set up, so we wouldn't do it for patch releases, stuff like that. So there is a gap there.
I completely agree. That's probably not something we do.
Okay.
Josh, I think we also discussed many times having the stability clusters running that we are doing for release to be running continuously. Also to part of the upgrade works that we are doing because we want to verify the upgrades. So presumably we'll have VMs that we set up be tested continuously, including for upgrades and this stuff. So patch releases will not need any manual testing, basically, just the initial setup.
Right. So, okay. So I guess what I mean is that, they're kind of like three things. There's a one-time pain in the ass manual setup. We'll do that just for the initial beta graduation, but we can't stay there for long. The second thing is we have our current stability tests. Those will start exercising VMs, but they're still manually triggered and interpreting. And as far as I'm concerned, that's really the bar for beta. And then there's a third thing of like automatically triggering these tests on new releases and doing some sort of pass-fail automatic determination. And we don't have that for anything right now, so I wouldn't call that a blocker.
Josh, I'd weigh in. I'd say that I agree that it's about time VM moves to beta, and that these are small enough things that it should move forward. However, I do want to point out that this is a different standard than we applied just last week to the UX promotion to beta request.
We have not agreed on this, by the way. Yeah, so we could.
Yeah. I will say the difference between that is that his contention here is around testing, whereas the contention on the Status API is in the implementation.
And
I haven't heard any concern
No,
about
last week it was about testing. This week it's about implementation, and the conversation's moved on. But last week, the reason that we chose not to promote to beta was because it was not yet enabled in our automated release qualification test pipeline.
Yeah, so I think that this is where we should be focusing the discussion. Is this okay? I'm not sure it is.
So I think there is a difference here, right, between an optional feature that does not affect anything else and something that is on forever. So I think there's a little bit of a false equivalence there. The question here is for VMs where it's still in beta and it doesn't affect any existing environments. Is it okay if we go out without having automated load testing?
Right.
I would much prefer some testing in Doc, even with Docker containers, so that people follow the instruction can actually get it working.
Would you block it? Because I think one, we'd be holding it to a much higher bar than other features, and then two, this one is particularly hard to do against VMs.
Yeah, you're right, but multi-cluster, we have automated testing, right? Every single page of multi-cluster, we have automated testing.
That's cool. Is it okay? So, Lynn, are you saying you would block beta on this, or is it a strong preference?
I would definitely strongly prefer, especially with Savan kind of told me he couldn't get VM working with 1.8. So, we've been having this for alpha for a long time. If we make it beta, I think the expectation is people should be able to follow the doc gets working. And I'm not saying you have to do it on the real VM. I mean, if you can do a Docker container, it's still better than nothing.
Yeah, I think one thing as well is that adding the docs testing is probably easier than adding the stability test.
Really? Okay.
Possible that if we, well, I think so. I haven't actually tried it, but
so actually, John, for stability test, yes, I think automation is important, but we do have long-running multiple clusters, and adding whatever 5 VMs to that test while the real automation is in progress is actually a fine compromise to get some mileage on those tests of number of days and whatever else. So I don't think that automation should just completely block. Testing is more important.
So you're saying
no.
Take the automated test, run it, and go manually add 5 VMs and connect them, but those VMs are manual, but it's connected to the automated ones. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Correct.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we could do that as well.
And we'll also cross upgradability test because.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a level of mileage we can get to, right, between some of the doc tests, but maybe Docker container only, and some of the stability tests. Right, we're not getting all the way there, but we're getting very close. Is that what we're saying?
I guess I haven't heard anyone say that the automated doc testing is actually a blocker. I'm hearing strong preference. So that would put it in the fast follow category. But in terms of adding it to the stability tests, that might really be a blocker.
So I think that the concern with the docs testing is that setting up VMs is very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more likely than normal that the docs will not work.
Then say it's a blocker.
It should be a blocker.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just get upgraded. You block now.
Okay. So that's one decision. Before I move away from that, John, what do you think?
Yeah, that's fine. I also wanted to ask, because all these things are documentation and testing, if we take longer than 1.9 to do this, can we still promote it, you know,
like mid
a week,
release?
2 weeks later, however long it takes for us to complete these, because there should be no, code changes.
I think we've been okay with the post-release promotion if there were no code changes.
Or if there's only bug fixes that went into a patch release.
Are we allowed to do promotion patch releases?
I don't think there's anything.
Have we done that before?
It doesn't even need to be in a patch release. We can promote it just on a random day. Yeah.
I was assuming there will be
changes,
a bug to fix, but
yeah. The only question is, right? Like the release notes are the mechanism for announcing the status change today, right? We would need to figure out some other mechanism for making that known.
I think we can just be transparent, which is that VM support in the initial 1.9.0 release wasn't considered ready for beta, but give people advance notice that we may be able to promote it to beta, midstream. So stay tuned.
Yeah, so just say that in the release note.
Yeah,
if that is a possibility.
Okay, so
I think we should also announce it to beta in 1.10 for people who don't read 1.9 patch release note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a big enough feature that a blog post seems like it would be warranted as well.
I think so. I actually had a couple quick questions on beta, on the beta graduation, John. So are all the APIs moving to beta as part of beta graduation?
That has not been planned.
Okay.
All right, we need to checkpoint a few things. First of all, the highlighted yellow text, does TOC actually agree with this statement?
I agree with that, yeah.
Lynn, Louis? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Great. Then we still need to. So actually, maybe we've already answered the stability test. I think we're saying that stability tests are also a blocker, but as soon as it's satisfied, we could potentially promote to beta in a 1.9 patch release. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
John, thoughts?
That's fine for me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really short release to promote things. 1.9.
Okay. All right. Okay. Great. Going once, going twice. Sold.
We're out of time.
Can either of these been done quickly? Okay, not the first one. Can we do Jacobs quickly?
It's fine to talk about it next week. Unless people say this is urgent. We've discussed similar things in the past.
I would approve this right now. Does anyone in the TOC disagree with an immediate approval? If so, we'll just discuss next week.
I am playing with Google Groups being a mechanism.
Okay. So we can discuss next week then?
But yeah, we can discuss next.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.